Ja, herzlich willkommen, hearty welcome to this event. If it is more convenient for you to listen in English, we have simultaneous interpretation, so please just use the headsets. We will speak English, we will speak German, we will switch a little bit. It's the Brussels format. Mein Name ist Detlef Fechtner.
My name is Detlef Fechtner. I'm the senior political reporter of the Börsen-Zeitung, and I will moderate this evening today. We also, of course, want you to participate in these discussions, and we're happy to welcome you here. But first of all, I would like to introduce the minister. He's unfortunately not here today, live, so to say, but we have a video message from him, and I'm very happy to introduce thus the Minister for Federal European and International Affairs and Bureaucracy Reduction of the state of Hesse, Manfred Pentz. He has the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Chairman, Mr. Groß, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to you all, to all of you, also the members of the European Parliament, the members of the Bundestag, the members of the Landtag, all our guests here at the state representation of Hesse to the EU. I would have loved to have been here, but as you might know, we have the Bundestag meetings here in Berlin this week, and this evening we are meeting with the Federal Chancellor and the Minister Presidents, and I act as a coordinator. It is nonetheless important that the Hessian State Bank and the State Bank of Hesse-Thuringia are meeting today at the representation of Hesse in Brussels to discuss a topic of enormous importance, not only for the Frankfurt Rhine-Main Financial Center, but ultimately also for Germany and Europe, of course. It is in fact about sustainability reporting in the financial sector. And for those who are more deeply involved in these issues, like you, I would like to assure you that this is also a very important topic for us, because we believe that a certain balance must be struck in this respect. We must remain connected with global financial sector and the wider context, and that's why I'm very interested in what will be discussed today and what conclusions you are going to reach. I will most certainly be kept up to speed about it. Until then, I wish you all the best in Brussels, a successful event, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much. We will, of course, report back to the minister, and we will also have a discussion, but first a bit of food for thought. We have Mr. Eckert here from the V Bank. You have the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Minister, online, and then dear Dr. Eckert, who is a host, dear members of the Parliament, I see Ms. Dahlke, dear Miriam, Ewald, Andreas, hello and welcome. Then we have, of course, Mr. Ferber, not only as a member of the Parliament, but also as a member of the panel discussion. A double welcome to you. And, well, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, dear members of the panel discussion, I'm very pleased to welcome you here in our very established format, the financial world in Europe. Demonstrating a presence in Brussels is a major priority for Helaba and V-Bank, together with the state of Hesse. This is particularly the case because Frankfurt am Main is the most important financial center in continental Europe, and it is located in Hesse. It might be that other financial centers in continental Europe see it differently, but me, as a representative here, have this opinion. And the issues affecting the Frankfurt Financial Center are always relevant in Brussels as well, which is why we are discussing sustainability this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, sustainability is not just a modern term. It's not a trend. Sustainability and thinking about a sustainable economical development and society is crucial, and we are there and we have to do something, and that's what we are doing. In December 2025, the European Parliament took a crucial decision for the financial world. It was the implementation of EU regulations for effective sustainable financing in Europe. Sustainability reporting and due diligence for companies. It's better known as CSRD and CSDDD. These abbreviations are great. I invite you to Google them afterwards. This decision, ladies and gentlemen, shapes the work of banks and also their client relationships. Banks support companies, startups, SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, through their various stages of development over many years and as reliable partners. A successful client relationship always requires a deep understanding of how stable business models are in a world that is affected by climate risks, geopolitical shifts, and technological dynamics, and thus is changing rapidly. In order to understand things, and this is not only the case in the financial sector, it's always important to collect and analyze data. These are the basis for financing decisions and for reporting. The CSRD, as we are talking about reports, was originally intended to be a milestone. For the first time, around 50,000 companies were to report an environmental, social, and governance aspect in a uniform, transparent, comparable manner. In accordance with the European Commission's guidelines under a one-size-fits-all solution, and this with all the challenges it entails for the various stakeholders. However, with the European Parliament's decision on the Omnibus 1 package in December 2025, far-reaching changes were adopted. The revised regulations apply to fewer companies than planned. They also limit certain obligations for companies, and this with the intention to strengthen the EU's competitiveness. Starting in 2029, due diligence obligations will only apply to large companies. Sector-specific reporting for smaller companies and SMEs will be voluntary. This, and I think it's right, so this rightly prevents reporting obligations from being shifted onto small market participants. It is an important step toward tangible reductions in bureaucracy, also towards greater efficiency and legal certainty for business activities. For the financial sector, this means, first of all, clearer thresholds, second, less complexity, third, more reliable ESG data, and better conditions for risk assessment and financing. At the same time, in future, around 90% of the companies originally affected by the regulation will be exempted from reporting requirements. This will certainly also be a topic later in the discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, Germany is a hub for industry and finance. Hesse and the Frankfurt Financial Center are the heart of the European capital market. Investments in transformation will require and have always required stable framework conditions across Europe and globally. And this is why this decision is so important. It creates stability, whether we welcome it in all its facets or not, but it creates stability. The Frankfurt Financial Center with the financial center strategy that was adopted recently also shows how closely the financial sector, industry, and innovation collaborate. This is where innovative solutions are developed that have an impact across Europe. Sustainable finance does not only arise through regulation, but through cooperation. The Sustainable Finance Cluster, with which we are working jointly with Mr. Hübner, welcome here, and with whom we jointly host this event today, plays a central role in this. And this is because it connects stakeholders in Frankfurt, Germany, Europe, and internationally, and by developing practical approaches. We are very happy that you are there and that we can work so much on a practical basis for you, and that we also work on the implementation of this finance strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming to an end. I wish to all of us an evening with an open and constructive discussion. We will discuss many topics that have to do with sustainability and regulations. It can also be a bit of controversy, because only if you have some kind of controversy in discussions, but with fact-based arguments, we can have a good debate that can lead us towards a good future. Well, in the sense, I look forward to this evening. Now you have the floor, and I wish you a good evening.
Ja, und dann würde ich auch.
And then I would like to ask our panelists, who will hopefully have a controversial discussion, as Mr. Reckes has demanded we have to disagree on some things. I will change some papers over, but there's seats reserved for you, dear panelists.
Ja, meine Damen und Herren, dann will ich Ihnen.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I will briefly introduce our panelists.
Here in person, but we are very much appreciate that you, Sue Lloyd, take part in this conversation, in this exchange of views. You studied accounting in New Zealand. You worked professionally in accounting since 2002. You are with the EFRS Foundation. So firstly, as a technical expert, as a technical director and senior director, and now in the management. So you were in the IASB in the accounting, on the accounting side. Now you're with the ISSB, with the sustainability standard side. You're a vice chair of ISSB, and we say hello to you. You're in Canada at the very moment. Happy to have you. Thank you for joining this debate. Thank you. Ja, und ich begrüße hier vor Ort.
Here on site we have Petra Sandner. We've met multiple times on the topic of sustainability already. You've worked with Arial, with EKB. You then moved to Helaba in 2008. You've worked in acquisition and finance, and transport finance, real estate finance, and you're the Chief Sustainable Officer of Helaba, which is why you're such a welcome and well-liked guest here. Thank you for coming. Markus Ferber, happy to see you. We have also met multiple times already. This is not a coincidence. This is due to the fact that when we discuss financial matters and reporting obligations, we journalists and moderators see and meet you. You're an engineer by trade. You've worked with Siemens. You've worked in environmental technology for FISMA. You've now been for some time in the European Parliament now, and you're here as part of your role as the coordinator of the EPP group in the ECON committee. Thank you for coming, and a warm welcome to you as well, Mr. Gentner. You studied at the same university as myself in Frankfurt, but you've also studied in England. You've worked in insurance, then moved to the Commission, and have worked on the internal markets. I've worked in Addis Ababa for the Commission. I've worked in New York. Have learned a lot about the financial relationships between the US and Europe. I've worked on that a lot. Very interesting topic. And you're here as representative of DJ FISMA as head of unit for corporate reporting, audit and credit rating agencies, amongst other things. A warm welcome and also thank you for coming to you. Last but not least, Mr. Sonnenburg, there's a lot in your CV that's very interesting. You were at FISMA, in the organization of stock exchanges. You've worked at IRS. You've worked for ECON, so you've profited from insights into today's topic from several perspectives. Thank you for being here in your role as the Chief Sustainability Officer of Deutsche Börse. So let's get started with our panel discussion, and let's start with an introductory question to get your general perspective. Ms. Sandner, what should regulators do when they establish standards in order to enforce and push this transformation of the economy? What's your answer? Well, from my point of view, regulators have to, because part of the name, they have to give a clear framework of possible actions that allows for actors to act within that framework. Regulation should not just serve the purposes of regulation, but should act in the interest of relevant stakeholders. And from our point of view as a financial institute, when we look at sustainability reporting concretely, we have two roles. First of all, that we apply the sustainability reporting ourselves. We make these documents, and we use those documents when we analyze the work and offers and proposals of our clients and their sustainability profile, which plays a very important part. And Michael Reckert has already mentioned how these things interconnect. Now, sustainability reporting has evolved very dynamically in recent years, and we have taken a huge step in the direction of quantification, meaning that we quantify these things in order to get a better measurements, better evaluation of the different aspects of sustainability based on that data. We want to put ourselves in the position where we can take better decisions as those who make those sustainability reportings, but also better decisions turning outward to provide a better baseline of information for decisions for stakeholders, for clients, for actors who need and consume those sustainability reporting documents. Thank you for that first impression. Of course, as part of the discussion, we will look into, is this framework really a clear set framework? Is it dynamic? What does that mean? What are the positive and negative consequences of that?
What should regulators, what should standard setters like the ISSB do to help and to support the transformation of the economy?
Question to start with, and I think the first thing I would say is that the role of the standard setters is to make sure that the disclosures that we ask for are proportionate. So it's information that's really worth the cost of providing information, because it's really decision useful. The information that you really need to understand the risks that a business has, its opportunities for the long-term resilience of businesses. And that's important to make sure that companies can attract the capital they need to sustain their businesses successfully in the future. And there's real benefits in that being globally comparable, because it's a competitive market for capital. So I think the proportionality of the information is a really key consideration for standard setters. Then I think the other thing that's really important is that we want this reporting system to be efficient. We don't want companies to be spending all of their time and resource on multiple reporting frameworks. So making sure that there's a compatibility, for example, between the ISSB standards and ESRS, so that a company can do the same thing once and meet two sets of requirements efficiently, including because the ISSB standards are now being used in 40 jurisdictions around the world, really aids efficiency. So I think proportionality of the information and efficiency are key, so that the focus is actually on achieving long-term resilience rather than just reporting for the sake of reporting.
Thank you for this input. Definitely we will talk about proportionality, definitely we will talk about efficiency, and definitely we will talk about how this fits together with ESRS and ISSB. So later on in the discussion we will come back to that. Markus Ferber, Ihre erste Einlassung zum Thema.
Markus Ferber, your first contribution. I think it's the key question here, because the things we do have to make sense, and the sense has to be, how can we accompany that transformation in order to get a climate neutral economy? And that's the task we're facing. I don't think that will be done by filling out enormous amounts of papers. No, this is done by sending clear signals to the markets, by being active, which is why I would like to cite 3 main points. Focus on data and don't overburden. What data do you need to take decisions? Surveillance needs data in order to execute surveillance tasks. Investors need data in order to know how sustainable is the investment I'm making here. And I had the impression, especially during the last legislative mandate, that they didn't focus on the must-have, but on the nice-to-have. And nice-to-have are data points that are indeed nice to have, but they aren't necessary or helpful for investors or companies or political decision makers. So focus on key elements, don't overburden. And as you've had already implied, think internationally. Sue has mentioned that if we have 40 different legal areas with different standards, that's not helpful. If we have international standards in such 40 areas, as is the case, we really have to ask ourselves, aren't we overburdening our companies by saying that you have to fulfill international standards, but you also have to fulfill additionally European standards? Those are topics that we will certainly delve deeper into, but I wanted to already mention them. And what seems most important to me is that we have to be coherent and consistent in our own approach. In Omnibus 1, we took away a lot of things in sustainable reporting that we left in financial reporting. Now, if I take this on from the perspective of the company, they do not have to be in my business report, but I still have to have that data if I want to get insurance or if I want to get credit. So these data points will have to be supplied anyway in the end, which means for me, we will need an omnibus for the financial field as well. Well, that's another topic that will certainly be very interesting for our audience. And Mr. Gentner is here as well, so we can certainly keep on discussing it. But before we get started with that, Mr. Gentner, what's your first answer, your first impression on the question, what needs to be done? Thank you. I would like to limit this to 2 things that our introductory speakers have mentioned. They spoke about sustainability. This is not being trendy, not being just a fashionable topic right now. This is linked to real problems that we're supposed to solve, and to act in a measured and proportionate way is really important. We have to find solutions. First of all, I agree with everything that's been said so far. We need working standards that support the companies, that allows for them to tell their story, to have comparable data points. And this has to contribute to a very important transformation that's just as important as it was 5 years ago, even if the political will or other political winds are changing right now. And these standards have to be calibrated and set up in such a way. And as you know, the Omnibus has suggested ways to not overburden the companies, that they still do what they should do, but that these regulations are applicable in a way that doesn't let costs explode. Those are 2 things we have to bring together. Thank you. We will certainly also discuss that further down the line. How will ESG evolve? It's not just a trendy topic, as you've mentioned, but isn't it the case that they are just as important, ESG is just as important as it was 2 or 3 years ago? We will talk about that. But before we get to that, I would like to ask you as well, Mr. Sonnenburg, for your first impression. Well, I'll skip the advertisements for the Capital Market Union, but I think this is a key element to promote sustainability. But I don't think I have to explain that to anyone in here. And so 2 elements, you mentioned demands. And the title for this event has been set up to be in opposition in a way. And I don't think it is contradictory. If we look at the ISSB standards and the SRS standards, there's a lot of things they have in common. We agree that sustainability and long-term resilience, resilient competitive business cases and models are important. And we need a global rulebook for that. That's my first comment. We, as the group Deutsche Börse, are active on 110 markets worldwide. We're connecting European markets to the world. This is not either or, it's and for us. And one brief thought about that, directed at the European Union, ISFS Foundation as well. I would say what we set up with sustainable finance in recent years is an innovation that came from Europe, and it drifted towards the sphere of academic thought and analysis. Well, no, we need to get more practical, more pragmatic in our approach to set up incentives. To mention an important keyword is very important, and direct towards the IFRS Foundation, the European standards have developed an effectiveness on a global level that should also be seized and used by IFRS to dutifully fulfill their function. And last point on that from me is that sustainability has led to a fragmentation of global markets. That's something we can't afford.
So now, this is also a point of discussion. Do we have more fragmentation, more vulnerability? Was this created?
That Sven, you mentioned with it shouldn't be a fashion, it should be on substance. ESG is important. Sue, what is your impression? You see a little bit this backlash of ESG, or we see a kind of backlash of ESG in America. You have the international perspective. What would you say, would you comment that ESG has, that the role is a little bit reduced in these days, or is it still on the operational side still the same and even growing? What is your impression?
I think that the companies are having to deal with a lot of uncertainty, and they come from these sort of sustainability related things like climate, but not only climate. So they have to navigate these risks, and some companies have opportunities. And so the relevance of these business risks and opportunities doesn't go away based on fashion or politics. And similarly, investors need to understand the risks that they're exposed to, so that they can price those risks appropriately and work out where the best place is for them to place their money, but also to find where the opportunities are with companies with good ideas or who are superior risk managers. And again, that doesn't go out of fashion. Investors don't need less information because of the fashion of ESG as an idea. This is about business risks, and it's about resilience of businesses and the long-term value of businesses at the end of the day. And so while there's political noise around this topic, it'd be remiss not to acknowledge that. I think the basic need for this information, both for companies to manage themselves well and for investors to price and place capital, is unchanged. But I think it makes it even more important that we get the balance right between the cost of what we ask companies to do and the benefits of the information they disclose. Because we just have to be really careful on that front, because it needs to be a very business-focused conversation.
Thank you, Sue. Frau Sandner, Sie haben...
Ms. Sandner, well, about 3/4 of a year ago, we talked about this, and we said for investment companies, this is still an important topic, so it's still the case here. But yeah, if we say that the topic didn't lose its importance, do you think, do you think this is the case, or is there still questions, of investment companies that might be more important than sustainability and push back a bit? Well, I think there is many questions that are important, but that doesn't mean that this topic loses its relevance. When I observe these discussions, the political discussions, we see this backlash, the term backlash. But when you really look in the real economics and look where investments are done, where markets develop, and where there is opportunities for a better competitivity, how competitivity develops, then I see that the development really goes in this direction. To be concrete, information in the framework of sustainability development, the information is very important to give loans to finance capital. It's just very important information. It helps us to understand which opportunities and chances does a company have if it is future-oriented, how this company is doing in this regard, and how these companies deal with these challenges. And this is something that we look at in the analysis, and it's also very important in the dialogue with customers. So it's still very important. Well, okay, thank you for reporting back from the practical side. But before we speak more with the political representatives here about consistency, for example, maybe just one more thing. From the point of view of the German stock exchange, because there is, you look more at the capital companies as provide, they also provide data. Because you also developed a very important branch, because there is quite a lot of demand. And can you say that ESG is still equally important? Yes, there is still a lot of demand, but it's often a question of narrative. It's a bit, the question of how you talk about things, but there's certainly demand. Of course, for investors, there's also it's important, but also there's the question of regulations, and there is this framework. So, but of course, we see effects as well. And in Europe, we sometimes have the impression we often discuss things theoretically, and how is it going to develop? But it's important. It's interesting when you look at Asia. In Singapore, for example, discussions are very different. At the Singapore Stock Exchange, for example, you can say it's a pity because they already feel these consequences of the climate, etc. So you can see that this is an important topic. But well, of course, you have to navigate. Also in the US, of course, we mentioned this already. And of course, you have to be careful always. Yes, so we said it is something important. This we now concluded. And it's not too late. But the question is, are we doing things well in Europe? Mr. Ferber, you mentioned consistency earlier. In terms of efficiency as well. So consistency, efficiency. What's your view on things? How do you see the current regulatory framework also after Omnibus 1? When you look at the international standard, it was just confirmed. You really have a very strong point of view of the investors here. So, and of course, this is an important point of view. And then there is this whole backlash discussion. This has to do, and I want to be straight here, with the fact that there was this discussion on taxonomy starting. We also had an event on this, Mr. Fechtner, right, a few years ago. And apparently it was about the question, how can you have marketing for a product and have a certain label for this product and to have such a label for a product. But I think this discussion has lost a bit momentum. But if you look at the approach of EFRAG, it's much further, it's much broader. It's not only a investor's point of view. And that means that the European standards, ESRS, are also broader than the ISSB. They go further than what the ISSB asks for. And the thing is, we have to make sure now that we avoid double reporting. And this is also something that the industry doesn't like, if they have to do the reporting twice. So we have to make sure that we have some kind of synchronization so that with reporting on the European standards, you also fulfill the international duties on reporting, so that it's not a double thing where there is already international standards. In my in the different committees where I am, it's also an important topic, and we always look at these things together and not separately, because there is this connectivity that is very important, and this is what it is about now and what is important. Then there is the other thing, when I can if I can mention the legal side of things, legislative side of things, because we have this new definitions now after the new omnibus, so the definitions of EFRAG. So this still has to be discussed. We are doing the preparatory work. Then we will have to have a look at it. And, well, because we have this scrutiny procedure as well in the ECON committee, where we are looking at things already before they have been proposed officially, because then we can only say yes or not. So this is the process we are in now. And for us, what is important is this synchronization between the European and the international level in order to avoid double reporting, because this will damage our companies. Like if you have the baseline standard and then the European one, which comes on top of it, if we manage this, we're on the right way. Yeah. So there was a question: consistency, efficiency, which now was added, and then also this the way to make these things happen together. Well, yes, I think our approach is still correct, and it's also written in the directive. We don't only have to look at investors, but also at other groups, because other groups also are interested in sustainability reporting, and we have to look also that we also show what are the risks and also what are the consequences, because these things are closely linked. So it's important to have a global picture and see all these things at the same time. But important as well is that what we are doing also is works well with the international level. So we have this word interoperability, but I think you can say things easy as well. We want to make sure that when a company in Europe has to make a report, that at the same time they automatically fulfill the international reporting standards, so they can use their European reports on this level as well, so that they don't have to do anything at all on top of that. So then it is unified on the international level as well, because these two most important standards will fit together, and this will profit the companies, and it will be good for everyone, and this is our clear objective.
Sue, how far along you are on this path of synchronization? Is this, as you have all the other jurisdictions in front of you, is Europe the really complicated case, or is there a good progress in coming to these synchronized standards?
Yeah, that's something that Sven and I spend many, many hours talking together about, and I would say we are making good progress. And maybe I'd make a little bit of a distinction between what we typically see in other jurisdictions and in Europe, and then talk about progress. So what we see in a lot of jurisdictions around the world is that the sustainability reporting they're introducing is using our standards, or a localized version of our standards that has the same outcomes as using our standards, and typically with an investor focus. So that's quite straightforward and similar in those jurisdictions around the world. What's special in the European context is this double materiality focus that you have, where, as Sven said, there's a focus on investors, but more as well, and where there's an intentionally to achieve particular public policy outcomes. And so what we have with Europe and the ISSB standards is a significant overlap, but some differences in terms of focus because of those different remits and perspectives. Now, what we were able to do, working super closely together when the first version of ESRS was published, was to get to a situation where, with a set of instructions that we set out in our interoperability guide that we jointly published with EFRAG, a company could understand how to navigate between the ISSB standards and the EFRAG standards to get to, an efficient reporting outcome to meet both sets of requirements. What's happened as a result of the omnibus is really good, that some of those differences have been removed. And in streamlining the proposed reporting through the omnibus process, some of the differences have been eliminated. And so we're actually closer together now in terms of our requirements than we were with the original version of ESRS. Now, what we want to achieve in the last push in the next few months is getting to the position that Sven rightly articulated. The dream for me is the same as what Sven said, which is that a company would be able to produce a single report and meet both the ESRS requirements and the ISSB requirements. And that's really, really important because a lot of companies in Europe will end up having to report in other jurisdictions as well as in Europe, where they've got international operations. And when they do that, they're going to be applying ISSB standards. And we're really close to that. There's a couple of things that we need to do. One is to make it clear in the final version of ESRS that the information for investors needs to be clearly identifiable and visible in the ESRS reporting. We call that non-obscuring. Another is to make sure that the way that the information is presented enables enough flexibility that you can meet offshore ISSB requirements as well as ESRS. Then I hope that we can remove this interoperability guide. I'm very proud of the interoperability guide, but it's not an easy thing to apply. We'd love to be able to delete that and replace that with a small list of items that a company that wants to meet both ISSB and ESRS standards needs to be aware of. So, for example, if you're in the banking industry, providing information about financed emissions is something you need to do for ISSB, but you just have this small list. And by doing that, you'd be able to meet both sets of requirements. And that's the dream. And that's what we're working really hard on at the moment. And we're tantalizingly close, I would say. And I'm really hoping we'll get there in the next few weeks.
Thank you very much, Sue. There was a lot of nodding here, which you might not have seen. So, but we will double check by asking now the banks and the stock exchange if they have the same conclusion that we are close to synchronize this. Sonnenburg, ist es so wie?
Is that the case, Mr. Sonnenburg, as Sue Lloyd has said, that good progress has been made and that this is tangible? I get the impression that we're making good progress, but in the end we will have to see what we get from the official positions. That's a question for other panelists, but from a capital markets perspective, I can say that is very important, that we don't even have to step outside of Europe for that. We have so many products that are cross-border. Eurostoxx 600 is one of our flagship indices, but it doesn't leave Europe, but it leaves the European Union because it includes Switzerland and Great Britain, which means that we need comparable standards and comparable database points for that. Well, regrettably, you've reminded us that we leave the EU when we go to the United Kingdom, but that's the case now. Now, I've promised to our audience that they can participate, so if you have questions or comments, I would look very much forward to that. Our panelists have already contributed a lot. Is there a question from the audience at this point? If that's not the case, you will at least now know that I was serious and that I will get back to you in 5 minutes. So back to our panelists. Mr. Gentner, if I may ask. It was partly the goal to create a competitive advantage, to have maybe a seal of quality for sustainability, or to at least show good regulations and be a pioneer, make others follow in our footsteps, set those standards. And in Brussels, you can mention the first regulator's advantage, as I call it. In Frankfurt, I get beat up when I mention it, but here in Brussels, there are people who like that term, also as a boost for green tech, for instance, that it is a good thing to have well-established sustainability regulation, but it can also be a competitive disadvantage if it leads to higher administrative burden, higher cost. What's the estimation of the situation of the Commission? You've set up that omnibus to correct certain things, after all. Mr. Gentner, well, the usefulness of uniform rules due to discussion has been hidden behind the discussion of the cost. Looking back at the discussion by 2022, when we decided CSRD, the global situation has changed a lot on an economic level, on a geopolitical level, and I think it's absolutely correct with such a topic as sustainability that we adapt to the situation, that we learn lessons and have consequences follow up, but uniform rules and uniform standards can be useful You should just remember that before we did that, there were a lot of different market-driven standards, because sustainable reporting is not something that was born of regulation. There was a demand on the markets because market participants, investors, want to know what do these companies do, and they want reliable information. They don't want just ad copies or marketing. They want cold hard facts. What does that company do? Where will it be in a few years? And these questions are just as relevant today as they were a few years ago. So I think in the middle and long term, these rules have the potential to be an advantage, and that the companies who do this, take this seriously, who do this correctly, can position themselves accordingly on the markets. But in the last 2 or 3 years, this was mostly overshadowed by the discussion about the costs and the difficulties, and the economic situation is vastly different than a couple of years ago. Now, with the rules changes in the omnibus, I hope that we can get back to a position where we look at the advantages and we can seize and use these advantages. Keyword omnibus. We have the good thing is we have people from theory and people from practice. So I can also ask Ms. Sandner and Mr. Ferber, because there was the risk, the danger, really, you've already implied in discussion, that the banks could be caught in the middle, that you have the BaFin or the financial surveillance authorities from Germany, or you have the European Central Bank that will ask you to do all these. And many companies say, well, according to the omnibus, I do not have any reporting obligations anymore. This is a problem for you. Do you still then in the end have to ask companies to provide you with data points that they are no longer legally obliged to provide you? Could you maybe give us an insight into that? Well, of course. Well, the omnibus, we've had a discussion about this where I was not sure yet if we were moving to the right direction. But now what we're seeing is really a facilitation. And the reporting has become a lot more pragmatic, it's more useful. The information that come out of it will be more useful. And what you've mentioned is really the question, who has to report? And of course, yes, it's the case that where companies establish such a report, we will be able to use the information within that report, that this is our first source. Where we do not have that report, and there are areas where companies can report voluntarily, which is it's advantages for the companies if we have such a voluntary report that we can access. When it doesn't exist, we contact companies to establish dialogue and to understand. And this is not just about collecting data. I have to really clarify that. That's one point of it. But it's really about getting an impression of the company as a whole. How to position themselves, how far and how much are they affected by certain topics, be it the transformation, be it transitory risk, physical risk. How do they handle those risks? How do they position themselves? Is their business model changing? What's the 5-year plan? Those are all crucially important informational elements that we need and that we would ask from the company in a dialogue where we cannot get that information from reporting. Thank you very much. Mr. Ferber, did the omnibus work in order to reduce the burden on companies? You might maybe get mail that that says, well, you're not asking for it, but the bank still want it, so it doesn't really help me. Is that a reaction you're getting, especially for SMEs? Well, what we fear is that they will still ask for that information. Just instead of asking for it at the start, they will ask for it afterwards. Now, the omnibus has facilitated things, that there's a reduction of mandatory reporting, less companies falling under the scope. But what I find very interesting nonetheless is that we're still covering the necessary amount of information. There are no informational gaps, which means that what the original plan was too detailed, too granular, and I voted for it against my will, just as others in the EPP, because we considered it too granular already at the time. So we're on the right track, and that we are now more synchronized between the European standards and the international standards. That's also helpful. We just have to be vigilant to maintain that, because this hasn't been abolished. We still have to continue to look into that. And that's the thing with institutions. They look at that. They don't decide, well, we've done everything we wanted to do, and for 5 years we won't do anything and let the economy act on its own. No, so we have to make sure that the synchronization we have achieved is maintained. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that in CSRD, the transition plans have been stricken out. It wasn't part of the Commission proposal, but Parliament and Council agreed on that, and they are in other regulations for insurers and banks. These elements are still present. So the question is, with a certain delay, won't the companies be obliged in the end once again to provide that information, maybe not as part of sustainability reporting, but then as part of financial reporting? So we have to be very careful to act in an appropriate and measured fashion. So, and as I've mentioned, we are thinking about an omnibus for the financial sector as well. And another topic that you had addressed, is this a competitive advantage? Well, yes and no. We see with the new SSC president last year, and he told us all the ideas that his predecessor introduced. He didn't name any names he would get rid of immediately. And this is just like spring cleaning. You have to get rid of the dust that's settled during the winter in your house. But for us, it's not one winter, it's 40 years of dust we have to get rid of. And I asked him, well, he was a member of the SSC as well. He has worked there for 25 years. If he hadn't contributed to the dust, he didn't really reply to that. But they're really on a different wavelength than we are right now, and we have to be careful that we find partners who are willing to walk the same path that we do. People in Asia are very carefully watching what we do. Japan has just taken over the international standard. They're not yet on the way to take our standards. And we should put more effort into this to make sure that other jurisdictions follow in our footsteps, also to have a counterpart to the US, until you get a situation where you have, where it's like fighting the Hydra. You chop off one of its head and you get 9 additional heads. And I think we would achieve more for us and for sustainability on a global level if we keep pace with the others instead of just pushing on ahead on our own.
Listening to Markus Ferber, who's talking about that maybe Asian economies could follow the European way, and ISSB. This is always a little bit the hope that you are like a catalyst for bringing these jurisdictions together. Would you say that in working and all this exchange of opinions with the jurisdictions, you have a contribution in that you bring together, not just by setting the standards, but by connecting the world, that people look a little bit more for best practices in other countries?
Yeah, I think that is part of the role that we have, and something that we've done right since the beginning of the ISSB being set up was we've established various working groups at a jurisdictional level to encourage conversations between key parties. So again, Sven's been part of this from the early days, where our original jurisdictional working group was 5 jurisdictions, including the EU, the US at the time, Japan, China, the UK, talking about what we would do that was sort of in the common interest, if you like, to have globally comparable information being encouraged around the world, and thinking about interoperability with the EU, given that you were ahead of the ISSB at the time. We've now developed that even further. We've now got a reconstituted jurisdictional adopters working group with around 40 participants, reflecting those 40 jurisdictions that I reflected on before. And the role of this group is to encourage these international conversations, to look at what does sort of global best practice look like and what can we do to facilitate efficient reporting, always coming back to that. And so some of the important conversations we're having at the moment are about ensuring that for companies using the ISSB standards, it's efficient for them to report cross-border. And I think a really important part of this conversation, given that the CSRD is a really important regulation, not just for European domiciled entities, but for subsidiaries and parts of businesses of foreign companies. And there's a question, obviously, about foreign consolidated reporting at a later date. Being at the table with the EU in these conversations to look at what best practice, what good looks like, to look at what's useful reporting, I think really helps in terms of working collectively. I really do think for the common good. I'm a very strong believer in that. So thank you for highlighting that.
I have a very tiny follow-up to the discussion we had before, because omnibus, so proportionality for small, medium enterprises. I've learned in the preparation for this discussion that ISSB had as well the idea of making it easier for SMEs to follow by giving reduced requirements. Where are you on this path of making it easier for the SMEs?
Yeah, it's something that we've focused on right from the start. So we talked in the very early days, right from the early days, about having a truly global baseline. So what we wanted to make sure was that the ISSB standards could be used in all sorts of different economies around the world, including in emerging markets and for all sorts of different sizes of entities. So right from the start, that's been on our minds, and we've dealt with that in a few different ways. The first way was by only requiring reporting on climate in the first year that a company uses the ISSB standards, rather than asking for information on other topics. So that was the first step to help with the introduction of the standards. And then what we've done in a number of places is, for example, when it comes to things like measuring scope 3, we've made it really clear that estimation is okay. We're not expecting people to, collect data directly from those in their value chains. And we've said that it's fine to use the best information you have, what's available without undue cost and effort. And so that's been at the heart of our requirements from early on. The other thing we've done, which has become very topical in Europe, almost too scared to raise it, is on topics like anticipated financial effects, we made it the case that you could use qualitative disclosures. You didn't have to quantify it, because we knew that would be non-trivial, particularly for information beyond the sort of near term. And so we've introduced these mechanisms in our standards because what we wanted to do was to make it possible for all companies to get started and for us all to get better over time. And so proportionality has really been at the heart of our standard setting right from the start. And we get positive feedback on that. We need to remind people we're really serious. You can use those reliefs, but they are really helping with the introduction of our standards, because it's a really new type of reporting for everybody all around the world.
Thank you very much, Sue. Ja, ich komme auf Sie zurück.
Well, I come back to you, and I already see one question there. I will come down to come to you. Maybe you can also say your name, please. Yes, my name is Katharina Bryan, GRI. Maybe I will bring bad news. There's not only 2 standards, there are 3. So GRI is the Global Reporting Standard.
And actually we work very closely together with Sven Gentner, Lloyd, to construct what's called a streamlined reporting system. So I'm actually wanted to point out about the competitiveness, that I would see the double materiality approach actually as an advantage for Europe. Why? Because there's a lot of countries adopting the ISSB, and several of them are continuing with impact reporting. So 40 stock exchanges reference GRI as guidelines. So in terms of what companies are already doing, so I think the perspective is much broader, and I know it's a difficult field. I've been working in that and for years now with Amazon. So the international developments are really important to ensure that our companies here, I'm European, so that's why I say, have the right information and the right policy signal to really prepare. And my question is to Deutsche Börse and Petra Sandner as well. So at the moment, companies are already reporting much more than ISSB or even sometimes ESRS. Do you see the risk that the reporting actually, gets narrower and will have less information available within sustainability reports? Thank you.
Thank you. A clear question, but I think that even Sven Gentner or Markus Ferber might have something to say on it. We start with a direct question to Petra Sandner and Daniel Sonnenburg. Yeah.
Ja, vielen Dank.
See the risk.
Vielen Dank für die Frage.
Thank you very much for the question. We also, did some reporting according to the standards. Then, of course, there's the risk that companies will do less reporting. So I always sit a bit between two stools here. On one side, I have this approach that, of course, more information is helpful, and then there is also this perspective of impact. It's good to also have an eye on this, also from investors' point of view. But on the other hand, and we discussed this on the beginning, what is the importance of sustainability still nowadays? And we have to come to a world where we are talking to a broad range of investors, not only investors that are working in the field of sustainability. I speak about any investor, and that everyone would take into account sustainability, not because they want to be particularly sustainable, but because it's important. And I think this should be the goal. Now we are speaking about reporting standards, and of course you also need some intermittence and some links with CO2 and other topics, and we have to build these pipelines, but also fill them. And I think this, of course, is something that also brings you very quickly to industrial policy, but it is two sides of the same medal. Yes, I see that you are already approving. Yes, indeed, I said it earlier, in order to be climate neutral, we need innovation and investments. And for that to happen, the market needs information. And this is actually what it is about. ESG or sustainability reporting, it's not just there for its own sake or to give some work to some consultants or to fill supervisory authorities with data. No, it's because it's needed. Well, if you talk about taxonomy, for example, sometimes the thing is that this transition is not addressed enough. Now we are still in the 20s, and we have to put the money into the transition to climate neutrality, not already into climate neutrality itself. And then we can use all this for the capital market, which is actually necessary. So I think it's about the focus, because otherwise we will not manage. Because then this will also lead to wrong information in the market. Well, maybe one word to GRI, because it was mentioned earlier. Yeah, there's also close collaboration with the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. And I'm actually not worried that reporting will really go back on the long term, because I do think companies are interested in participating, and we also have many big companies, large companies, that said that they will report according to ESRS, even if they are not obliged to do it because they have their seat in America or somewhere else, for example, because they actually do see it as a chance to do reporting and cover all the topics and give their investors a global picture, a full picture. So when you create a standard that can fulfill this goal, then I think it really can be very useful as well. Yes, thank you very much. Sue, maybe you want to add something.
Yeah, maybe I'll add something. So firstly, I think it's really important also to realise that a lot of things to do with impacts are things that are financially material. So often people think that financially material information is narrower than it is. And maybe the poster child for that is that we do ask for information about greenhouse gas emissions, because that has an effect on a company's cost of business and how it might need to adjust its business, how it needs to transition. And so a lot of impact-related information is financially material information, so it's covered by the ISSB standards. But over and above that, we have a very close working relationship with GRI as well, because again, where there's overlaps in information, we want to make sure there's efficient reporting. So we were really pleased last year that GRI confirmed that they would accept the emissions reporting in accordance with our S2 standard to comply with the GRI's new climate standard. But in addition to that, we work closely with GRI because we know that many companies may choose to still want to use the GRI standards as a complement to the ISSB standards. And so we're trying to make sure that they can do that in an efficient and effective way. And because many companies just chose to use the GRI standards voluntarily, I anticipate there'd still be an appetite for that in many cases. So I don't think there needs to be a fear that because of the introduction of this more formal regulated form of investor-focused reporting on sustainability, that means that there is necessarily a focus away from this GRI reporting either. So I really don't share that concern.
Thank you very much. Ja, wir biegen.
Well, thank you very much. Now we are going to the final round. I would like to make a short summary and also look into the future. But let's start with the two representatives of the loans sector, loans industry, banks industry. What are your expectations to decision makers? What are your hopes? You said clearly what you're happy with, what maybe less. Is there something where you could say, well, if I had a wish, because you have the relevant people here, you can tell them your wish directly. So what would be your wish to standard setters and regulators? Maybe you would like to start. I already mentioned a bit in the beginning. Of course, we would like to, when we look at the global markets, we would like to have a good collaboration for the standards, and we don't see like that there is some enemies or something. It's really about collaboration. And I think this will really be good for companies, for the European and the German economy, and also for the export industry, but also the other way around. And of course, we try to mobilize a lot of capital in Europe, and there should be a lot of investments in Europe. Of course, that's the goal. But we also, of course, would like to invest European capital outside of Europe, and that's why these standards are important. That's why I already said it a bit before. I would like to have an even closer, that these standards are even closer, and then these incentives as well, because we mentioned how they interact, transparency standards and other standards, and I do think as well that within the standards themselves there can be a lot of incentives as well. There has been a lot of simplification on level 1, but on level 2 I think there is still some room for improvement, because it's actually a whole ecosystem. So we should make sure we are not like strangling ourselves in Europe. Thank you very much. I'd say there's also the European Accelerator Act, but I think you can still say I would like to invest also without Europe. It doesn't always have to be Europe. But of course, it should be time and again Europe, if possible. Well, what I would wish for is that in terms of reporting, that there is consistency and reliability after the implementation of the omnibus, and that we will have some kind of stability now, so that we can now constantly report for 1 or 2 years and then have a reflection and see what was good and what can be improved. Because there has been a lot of changes, a lot of movement. There was the implementation, then there was a break. And of course, it makes sense. But I think we should now have a phase where we should have first some implementation and then look back, so that we are even able to look back. And then on this basis, do the next step. Always keeping in mind that we should have a good and pragmatic reporting, which provides good information for stakeholders from this, for financial stakeholders and other stakeholders. Yes, thank you very much. This gives us a good bridge to the question that I would like to ask to Mr. Ferber and Mr. Gentner, because we saw the omnibus. Was that it for now? For a longer time now? I give you, Mr. Gentner, also the opportunity to mention the financial services omnibus, but maybe just this question on the sustainability side, was that it for now? Well, you already mentioned this. Now we said already for the third time that we need this, but indeed, we are now working on the ESRS standards. And there was 400 data points. It was reduced to 400 data points, and yeah, this is of course now something that we are working on. And then now we are also working on the FSDR directive. On disclosure, and then we have the criteria and the taxonomy that we're working on as well, because taxonomy should only is looking at I'm green and I'm less green or more green, but actually we have to look at how you become green in the first place, and there we have to look at the steps. So anyway, nothing is concluded yet. And you cannot say that the omnibus is done now and in the parliament we will now rest. No, there is many other things we have to look at.
Well, Mr. Ferber has mentioned 3 times the financial omnibus. I can't say anything about it anyway, because this is not my responsibility. But as far as reporting is concerned, there are 2 elements I have to mention. First of all, we have to really conclude this. The mail will be arriving at Council and Parliament in June, because we need to have a reliable finished package. Afterwards, the most important thing is stability. Leave it be, let it have an impact, let the market grapple with it, handle it, find solutions, and we'll take a step back. And there are currently no plans to do further things, because enough has been done over recent years. Ms. Sandner looks very relaxed hearing that. Looks like she appreciates hearing that.
What is the next milestone of ISSB? You mentioned already some ideas for the coming months, but if you, in a nutshell, what is the next on the way to the basic to the global baseline? What is the next milestone?
Well, we're always working on supporting jurisdictions adopting the standards, so that's ongoing work, and making sure that works efficiently across markets. If I look then at the sort of standard setting front, I think a key milestone for us in the next few months is going to be continuing our work with the Commission and EFRAG to try to see if we can get to this dream outcome in terms of a single report that can be used to meet both sets of requirements. So that's in the near term. And then over and above that, we are working to enhance our industry-based standards, our Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or SASB standards. And that's relevant to everybody in the room, because the revised draft ESRS would allow companies to refer to those standards to inform their entity-specific disclosures in ESRS. So we're continuing our work on that. And then we're starting to build out our work on what we will do on nature and human capital. But we're doing that sort of carefully to make sure that we don't introduce it too quickly, because we've heard loud and clear that digesting the current climate reporting and using our current S1 standard is a lot already for everybody to digest. So we're moving forward on nature and human capital, but at a pace that we hope the system can digest well. So lots to do.
Thank you very much, and fingers crossed that everything is working the way you would like to have it. Thank you very much. Wir kommen damit zum Abschluss dieser Diskussion.
Thank you very much. We're reaching the conclusion. The wrap-up will be done by Matthias Hüber from the Sustainable Finance Cluster, but I would like to thank you very briefly. I would like to thank our technicians. Thank you very much for this excellent performance. We had no technical failures, even though we were connected with people on another continent. There was a double connection, just like in popular sports programs. So once again, thank you to our technicians. You really did a great job. The second piece of thanks is for two people. It's for Sue Lloyd on the one hand.
I have to thank very much the interpreter, because you made it possible that I have total respect that you are like thousands of kilometers away, following exchange of opinions in a different language and being so much part of that. Thank you very much, Sue, and thank you very much for the interpreter. So, und nachdem wir jetzt gelernt haben, was wir hier alles...
And now that we've learned all the things that are possible here in the position of Hessen, I would like to thank you all for your participation and for not getting scared of all the acronyms of ISSB, ESRS, GRI, and all the other acronyms that we've heard. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for being with us. And I would also like to thank the high-quality, brief, and interesting answers of our panelists. I ask questions and I get answers. I love that in Brussels when I talk to politicians elsewhere. That isn't always the case. So as a journalist, thank you for providing me with that wonderful experience. And now I will pass the floor to Matthias Hübner. So Mr. Fechtner didn't thank himself, of course, but I think a round of applause is also due here. Thank you for moderating today's panel. I'll be brief. As the Sustainable Finance Cluster, we're very happy that we could have that very interesting event where we were allowed to host this in part. I'm very happy that we could demystify certain things, because there are people who still think that sustainable finance is dead. And a very lively discussion today has shown that it's quite the opposite. And I think the trend that we're talking about, concrete questions of implementation, shows that this topic has evolved. It may not be as hyped, as huge as it was years ago, but it has become a lot more tangible and substantial, and we're getting closer to actually doing things, and that's what matters. Furthermore, the panel has really cleaned up with that supposed contradiction between CSRDs and ISSB on one side, ISSB on the other side. People say that a panel needs some controversial elements. I was quite happy, to be honest with you, that most of our panelists were agreed, because this is a very important topic and we should not be stuck on technical details that we disagree on. No, we should work together and we should try to find allies beyond Europe to fight together for this topic, and always remind ourselves why we do that, because we don't do reporting for the sake of reporting. We want to make sure that the world remains in a good state, that we protect climate and nature, that we find a societal balance and maintain that. And on a micro level, companies should have the requirements to develop resilient business models, efficient business models that allow them to make good money. That's important. It's not a contradiction to be profitable as well as sustainable. And I think from that point of view, we've made a lot of progress with today's discussion. I'm very happy about that. And I would also like to see some of you continuing that discussion over a drink. Looking forward to many further interesting exchanges with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue.